Let me start with something that's going to irritate a lot of people. Most behaviors we call self-sabotage aren't weakness. They're intelligence misfiring under pressure. And if you've ever pulled your hair, picked your skin, bitten your nails until they bled, or felt an urge you knew made no sense, but did it anyway, your brain, it wasn't broken. It was trying to regulate you. Now that sounds comforting, but here's the part no one likes to hear. Your brain may have learned this habit because it worked. Hold that thought. Guys, I once worked with someone highly intelligent, articulate, successful. They wore hats everywhere, indoor, outdoors, meetings, weddings, funerals. It did not matter. Everyone assumed it was style. It wasn't. It was trichotillomania, compulsive hair pulling, not stress pulling, not boredom pulling, automatic pulling. She didn't even realize she was doing it until her fingers came away with hair. And here's what shocked her the most. She wasn't anxious before the pulling. The anxiety came after, which raises a disturbing question. What if the behavior isn't caused by anxiety, but creates it? Now, let's talk brain chemistry, because this is the part where people get uncomfortable. We like to think we are in the driver's seat of our own lives, right? But most of the time, we're just passengers in a machine that craves a hit, right? Body focused repetitive behaviors, BFRBs, things like trichotillomania, which is hair pulling, excoriation, which is skin picking, onychophagia, which is chronic nail biting. We also have things like cheek chewing. Guys, girls, these aren't bad habits or simple impulse control problems. They are high velocity habit loop disorders hardwired into your basal ganglia, the brain's basement where all your automatic survival scripts are kept, basically. Now, there is a verified mechanism, right? Kind of a neural shakedown, if you will. So you've got the trigger, right? Which is, I don't know, like a subtle sensory itch, right? A micro spike in anxiety. It could even be just like cognitive boredom. And then there's the behavior, part two. You pull, you pick, you bite, right? You chew. And then there's three, the dopamine spike. Your brain's ventral striatum floods with dopamine. It's not joy, it's relief, right? It's the sensation of a system reset that provides a temporary burst of laser-like focus or emotional regulation. And then next, there's the tagging, right? Your brain notes that this specific movement fixed the discomfort. And then there's the reinforcement. The neural pathway in the brain actually thickens as a result of this. Next time you're stressed, the basal ganglia, it doesn't ask for your opinion. It just hands you the tool. This is the exact same circuitry used in OCD, Tourette's, and even substance abuse pathways. It's even the same mechanism elite athletes and musicians use to build muscle memory. Which leads us to the next uncomfortable question. If the brain gets rewarded, does it care if the behavior is bad or destructive? Spoiler alert, it does not. Your brain would rather you be calm and bleeding than anxious and intact, my dudes. The machine only cares about the chemical payoff. Uh-oh. We've also got the OCD connection here, right? Self-soothing gone rogue, if you will. Here's where the armchair psychologists on the internet get it catastrophically wrong. They call it OCD because it looks repetitive. But labeling a BFRB as classic OCD is like calling a shark a big goldfish because they both live in water, right? But they are fundamentally different predators. I mean, classic OCD is driven by fear-based obsessions. You wash your hands because, I don't know, you think your family will die of the plague, right? It's a desperate attempt to neutralize a perceived danger signal from the environment. And here's the real big distinction, right? BFRBs, trichotillomania, excoriation, things like this, right? They are driven by internal regulation. You aren't trying to prevent a disaster. You're trying to manage a sensory mismatch in your own freaking body and brain. And there's brain imaging evidence to back this up. I mean, OCD lights up the orbitofrontal cortex, the is this a threat center, the anterior cingulate cortex, the error detection center, and the striatum, the habit reward center. The clinical translation here, one is a fear circuit gone haywire, the other is self-soothing gone rogue. In BFRBs, your brain has found a tactile hack to lower its volume. It's an autoregulation glitch where the body uses itself as a fidget spinner to stay sane. I mean, it's brilliant, but it begs a much darker, much more urgent question for 2026. What happens to a population when society systematically removes healthy, tactile regulation outlets and replaces them with sterile, high stress digital noise? If you take away the natural soothe, the brain will find a primal pull. And what's society's role in all this? What is the modern nervous system trap? I mean, let's talk environment. All right? Because your brain wasn't built for the 2026 landscape. Let's be real. We are living in a high stimulus, low discharge trap. We have essentially removed every natural exhaust valve for human stress and replaced them with more pressure. I mean, it's like the modern siege here. Zero physical discharge. In our ancestors' world, if the amygdala fired, I mean, the body moved. You were freaking out the door, right? You were running as fast as you could to get a spear so you could fight off that saber-toothed tiger. Not today. Today, you get an infuriating email, right? Or a terrifying news alert, and you sit there. You stay at your desk. That physiological charge has nowhere to go. So it stays in the muscles, vibrating until the brain finds a way to release it through a micro movement. Mm-hmm. Endless cognitive stimulation. This is another problem, right? I mean, we have obliterated silence. Every gap in your day is filled with an algorithm designed to spike your dopamine. Even the show, baby. This creates a state of cognitive overload, right? Essentially, where the brain is so noisy, it seeks out tactile sensations like pulling or picking or, chewing, right? Just to ground itself in the physical world. I mean, this is crazy stuff. You are self-soothing in a really bad way, guys. There's also the evolutionary pivot here. Historically, humans regulated their nervous systems through the rhythmic movement and ritual of their daily lives. Think about it. Churning butter, weaving, walking miles, rhythmic chanting. I mean, these are all external regulators that keep the basal ganglia calm. Modern humans, we've replaced this with self-stimulation and micro behaviors. When you have no communal ritual or physical labor to process your stress, what happens is your nervous system creates an outlet. I mean, Sometimes, though, that outlet is your own scalp, your own skin, right? Your own nails. The twist most people miss is, and quite frankly, this is a psychological gut punch, and it keeps you stuck, right? Here's the problem. Trying to stop the behavior, it usually makes it worse. Now, why is that? Because of the paradox of effort. When you tell yourself, I must not pull, I must not pull, I must not pull, you are increasing your internal monitoring load. You are hyper focusing on the urge, which actually increases your anxiety. Then it spikes your nervous system arousal, which, wait for it, increases the need for the relief that the behavior provides. You are trying to put out a fire with gasoline, my friends. And gasoline does not put out fires, but it makes them bigger. Look, by trying to force control, you are actually strengthening the very stress loop that triggered the behavior in the first place. You aren't weak willed. You're just trapped in a biological feedback loop that feeds on your own resistance. I mean, this stuff is terrifying, right? Then we've got the cognitive science, right? The white bear problem, if you will. There was this guy, psychologist Daniel Wegner, and he basically described or he demonstrated something called ironic process theory. If I tell you, don't think about a white bear, which, by the way, is the best episode of Black Mirror, but don't think about a white bear. What does your brain do? It immediately checks for the bear. I mean, like, you can't stop it. And suppression actually increases salience. The same happens with BFRBs. Monitoring, it increases your awareness. Awareness increases that's right, urge. The urge increases the behavior. And then shame locks the loop down, my dudes. Which is why people say, I do it more when I try to stop. They're not lying. So what actually works? Hold that. We're getting there. But a quick reality check here, right? A mental health care caveat, if you will. Before we go any further, I want to make it very clear here. This is an educational program. This is not therapy. And if your urges are severe, distressing, or harming you, evidence based treatments exist, right? And licensed professionals actually matter. So, you know, go see them if these things are happening for you. All right. So now back to the uncomfortable truth here. Unfortunately, well, I don't know if it's unfortunate, but here's something that irritates the positive vibes side of pop psychology. BFRBs, they are disproportionately more common in high intelligence, high sensitivity people. This isn't a glitch of the weak minded, right? It's often a side effect of having a high performance engine with no speed limiter. I mean, high intelligence brains, they often have a more porous thalamic filter, right? They don't just see a hair, they feel its texture, its root depth, and its wrongness with agonizing clarity. And this is called overexcitability by Dabrowski in 1964, right? Your brain is basically picking up signals that the average brain simply ignores. You also have a really busy default mode network, right? When you aren't focused on a task, your brain doesn't go quiet. It goes into high speed internal narrative mode. For the high IQ individual, this default mode network is often hyperactive, leading to rumination. And to quiet that noise, I mean, the brain seeks a physical anchor. It uses a BFRB to narrow the focus to a single point of tactile data rather than the overwhelming nature of the generalized anxiety. And then there's this myth of discipline that society throws out there. And it brings us to a real dangerous thing here. If I just had more discipline, I'd stop. Uh-uh. This is where people beat themselves into a depression, believing they're weak. But let me tell you about a woman I knew. She grew up pulling out her eyebrows literally every single hair until she had nothing left but scars and questions. I mean, she eventually overcame it on her own through what appeared to be sheer willpower. But how did she actually do it? Because in neuropsychology, we call this top down inhibition. She didn't just stop. I mean, she utilized her prefrontal cortex to manually override the basal ganglia's automatic script. She created a hard stop in her neural circuitry. But here's the caveat: sheer will is a high cost metabolic resource. It's not an easy task here, and it puts a lot of strain on the old brainy poo. It's like holding a door shut against a flood. It works for some people. It worked for this lady, the outliers. But for most, I mean, willpower is a battery that eventually runs out. Relying on will alone is actually an exercise in cognitive load. If you're using 90% of your brain power just to not pull, you've got nothing left for your life, your career, joy. So the truth here is sheer will is a feat of mental strength, but it's brute force. It is a brute force hack. It's impressive, really impressive. This lady is really impressive, but it is not the only way. Your brain isn't broken because you can't will it away. Your brain is simply so fast and so sensitive that it has learned a very effective, albeit destructive, way to regulate its own intensity. Thanks, brain. So, what actually treats it? And this is evidence based. Let's talk science, not vibes. All right. So, the most supported treatments, number one, you have this thing called HRT, which is simply an acronym for habit reversal training. Right. It basically allows the person to have awareness of the issue without any judgment, right? And then you build basically competing responses, keeping your hands busy, muscle engagement, these types of things. And then, you have a sensory sort of substitution that goes along with that, and it replaces the destructive pulling, biting, etc. behavior. Number two, you have what's called stimulus control, right? Change the environment, not willpower, right? I mean, barriers reduce automaticity. In other words, keep yourself busy. You also have this new, it's called ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and you allow the urge without obeying it, right? You sit there and you just allow the urge and you focus on the urge, but not doing the behavior. And what happens is you try to calm yourself down, right? This reduces the shame response, right? You can live in it without actually going through and doing the behavior. I think quite frankly, there's medication. I mean, number four, medication sometimes. SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, usually used for things like depression, anxiety. They've had mixed results with these disorders. You have NAC, which is basically a form of acetylcysteine, right? And this is actually showing promising evidence for reducing urges via glutamate modulation, another one of those neurotransmitters involved in movement, things like this. But here's the kicker: treatment what actually works best when the person stops seeing themselves as broken and just accepting that it's a part of themselves, right? The fastest way to keep a disorder is to turn it into an identity, right? This is not your identity. It's one aspect of your life, right? Don't call yourself a hair puller. You don't say I'm broken. You don't say this is who I am, right? I mean, this is stuff they teach you in general therapy all the time, right? You can't have these negative sort of self-defeating, thoughts. I mean, brains love consistency. So the goal isn't stop the behavior. The goal should be outgrow the loop, which leads me to the final question. What if the urge you hate is actually your nervous system asking for regulation? What if the behavior isn't your enemy at all, but a signal? And what if the real danger isn't the habit, but the shame you learn to wrap around it? Sit with that. Let it sink in. You're not broken. If this episode made you feel seen instead of judged, hit subscribe. I could really use the help here. We don't fix humans, not on planting thoughts. We learn to understand them. I'm Mike. This is Planting Thoughts, and I love you, even if we pull out all your hair. Later, guys.